Tonight, a parade of State Department officials have gone up against the higher-ups and testified in the impeachment inquiry. When asked about that today, here is what Secretary Pompeo said.
But no defense of your employees?
Nadia?
I always defend State Department employees. It's the greatest diplomatic corps in the history of the world. Very proud of the team.
Joining me now, State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus. Morgan, great to have you with us. Thank you for being here tonight. Here's a little snippet of Ambassador Yovanovitch and what she said when she testified about this the other day. Watch.
It's, I think, been a big hit for morale, both at U.S. Embassy Kyiv, but also more broadly in the State Department. People don't know kind of whether their efforts to pursue our stated policy are going to be supported.
Is that true?
So I think I would point to what the Secretary, Mike Pompeo, said today at his press conference. He talked about the fact that he feels that we have the greatest diplomatic corps. I think he said something along the lines in the history of the world. And I think really important, and I'm a policy person, and so I can certainly speak to the policy that the Secretary talked about today in Ukraine. And this is a really important point, and several people in these investigations or in these things in Congress have spoken to the fact that we have reversed many policies as it relates to Ukraine that were actually counterproductive, that were allowing Putin to come in. The policies of the Obama administration, where they did not give lethal aid to the Ukrainians, actually risked Ukrainian lives. And so we have sought, Secretary Pompeo has sought to reverse those failed policies, to give lethal aid to the Ukrainians, and to help bolster them and to provide a bulwark against Russian aggression. That's a policy that we stand behind. That's a policy that we're continuing to pursue in Ukraine, and one that the Secretary will continue to pursue as long as he's there.
And we've pointed that out here a lot, you know, just on the basis of who has been tougher against Russia. And all of these individuals who have gone before the given testimony have also agreed to that yes, the Trump administration has been tougher and providing that lethal weaponry than the Obama administration ever was. But with regard to just the basic fact that Secretary Pompeo said he did not want people to testify in these hearings from the State Department, and yet I think 12 of them, either former or current, now have. How does he feel about that?
Well, I think the Secretary, he's given a lot of interviews on the subject, and his initial comments when he spoke to that were related to the fact that in these closed-door hearings, that State Department lawyers were not allowed to be present. You also had many committee members that were calling State Department employees directly and not going through the normal protocol, through the normal official channels, and that was obviously quite intimidating to people. If you can imagine not getting a call from the State Department legal counsel, but getting a call directly from a committee asking you to show up causes quite a bit of confusion. And so everything that I've seen the Secretary do has been in the best interest of protecting the department, and he will continue to do so.
So with regard to the policy, I just want to play one more soundbite from Bill Taylor, who talks about the fact that prior to the phone call, he had contact with President Zelensky's representative, who emphasized something about his concerns, about Zelensky's concerns. Watch this.
Also, on July 20th, I had a phone conversation with Alexander Danylyuk, President Zelensky's national security advisor, who emphasized that President Zelensky did not want to be used as an instrument in a U.S. re-election campaign. The next day, I texted both Ambassadors Volker and Sondland about President Zelensky's concern.
Is that a concern on President Zelensky's part that you can, identify with, that you can understand at the State Department, that he wouldn't want to be perceived as being in the middle of the United States election in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of this is helpful for Zelensky, and certainly not for strengthening Ukraine, which is vitally important in our efforts to push back on the Russians, not just in Ukraine, but in the Middle East and throughout Europe and in Venezuela, in Cuba, and other places where you see a nefarious Russian presence. That's something that we deal with on a daily basis at the State Department. And what Secretary Pompeo was doing today at the State Department podium should be picked up, because we are talking about stories that aren't getting told around the world, which you have Iranian people protesting against their government. You have people in Hong Kong with the same protest.
Absolutely.
We saw something in Bolivia that we have not seen in decades, which is the Bolivian government kicked out hundreds of hundreds of Cuban officials. We're seeing movements in Latin America throughout the Organization of American States and other groups. I think we have at least over 50 countries now that are recognizing Juan Guaido, the legitimate elected leader in Venezuela. I could go around the world.
I think those are huge stories, and we
winning.
heard Secretary Pompeo today saying that, looking at the violence in the street in Hong Kong and saying, what also needs to change besides law enforcement is the policy from China towards these people, which I thought was a very powerful statement. But before I let you go, I do want to ask you about Israel and the decision on the settlements there. The policy of this administration now to say that those settlements are indeed legal. That's a big move.
Well, actually, what we said is we're taking back to a position that had been for decades, careful bipartisan approach. And what we're saying is that we're not actually declaring that the settlements are illegal or legal. Instead, we're getting it back to that neutral approach so that we can bring both parties and both sides together. It's important to remember that after Hillary Clinton lost the last election, in the 11th hour of the Obama presidency, Secretary Kerry came out and reversed that position that we had towards Israel. And it was really a very tough, some people would consider it a slap in the face to our ally Israel in the waning final days of the presidency. So we are setting the record straight. We are getting back to where we should be, where Ronald Reagan was. And we are saying that we want both sides, both parties to come together for a negotiated peace. That's the only way we get to peace in Israel.
Good point. Great to have you, Morgan. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
See you
Martha.
soon.